In this video, we're going to explore the biggest challenges we see with businesses that run a perpetual stock methodology and potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of headaches. I'm going to share with you the biggest mistakes people make, but also most importantly, how to rectify those mistakes to get accurate stock reporting for your system. As a quick recap, perpetual stock methodology means every single time you buy something into stock, it increases your stock value, and every time you sell an item or consume it in your manufacturing process, it adjusts the stock value and the profit and loss on an ongoing, or perpetual, as the name suggests, basis. And the problem with inaccurate financial reporting with perpetual stock reporting is that you're not showing an accurate cost relative to the sales you generate. Let's look at a wholesale business first as an example. You might have an item that you sell for $100 and the cost of that item was $50, but your financial reporting does not show that the item we sold for $100 cost us $50. The $100 in sales will be there, but not necessarily the $50. Same thing in a manufacturing business. Let's say we sell an item for $1,000 and the costs of the inputs that go into that item are $400. Again, we will see on the revenue line $1,000 worth of revenue, but the $400 of inputs and costs into that item won't necessarily reflect the true cost of what went into that item. You might be asking, well, how on earth does that happen? Surely a financial system should be able to go, if I sold this item and these are all the things that went into it, they should match up. We're going to explore how the intricacies of the system work that lead to these inaccuracies, but most importantly, how to rectify them. And going one step further, how these investments you make to rectify these problems or to mitigate them ever happening can actually be one of the best investments you make in your business around business improvement and profitability and cash improvement, which is what we all want as business owners. Before we review the problems that are faced through running a perpetual stock management system, an important place to start is what are the costing methodologies that are used in a manufacturing or a wholesale business that uses perpetual stock management. They are average cost method, and the other method is last cost method. For example, average cost means the following. Average cost means we take the average value of a stock item which we have in stock. Let's say, for example, we have a stock item that we have 8 units of it in stock. We bought 5 of those units from one supplier for $100, and we bought the other 3 units from another supplier for $110. This would make our average stock value per unit of $103.75. The calculation for this being 5 times 100 plus 3 times 110, which is the total value of what we've purchased, and dividing that by 8 to give us an average value of $103.75. Don't worry, you don't have to manually calculate that. Any finance and ERP system that you use will have the smarts to calculate this for you. If we're running a last methodology, that means if we bought the exact same 8 units we just spoke about, and the last supplier we purchased it from was the $110 supplier, this would mean that our 8 units would be worth 8 times 110, being the last price that we paid for it. So it would give us an $880 value on our stock. This in isolation might seem a little unfair because one time your stock's worth $880 and another time it's worth $800. The idea around last cost methodology is that it gives you a fair market value at that point in time. If you look at anything that's happened in the last 2 years with inflation and the costs increasing, is that you could actually have sat on stock. Let's say you sat on just steel and you had 10 tons of it and you bought it a few years ago and did nothing with it, that is naturally going to be worth more because of the price increasing of steel over that period of time. There isn't a right or wrong method to use around last and average. As I said, they do tend to average themselves or equalize themselves over a period of time. And also, as long as you're consistent, you can't pick 1 month and go average and then the next month use last because, that's the way you want it to be. You have to be consistent in your application. And I would say I know just as many businesses that use average method as that use last. And I don't think one is better or worse than the other. Now that we've covered off on the basics of how the stock methodology works and the costing methods work, we're going to go into the intricacies of why these problems occurred. And then later on, we're going to explore how to mitigate and to rectify these problems. The first problem is selling an item without a cost price. How does this happen? We've processed a sales invoice for a stock item we have not yet entered the purchase invoice for. How most ERP systems work, in fact, just about all running on Perpetual, is they need to have an established cost in the system already before it attributes a cost. So if I sell an item for $100 that I've never actually purchased in before, the system will just go, I sold it for $100 and it has zero cost. I need to ensure that I don't sell anything which doesn't have a cost attributed to it yet. So if you have problems with time around the timing entry of the purchase invoice relative to the selling of the invoice, you have to make sure those two are in sequence. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem where we're selling items for full revenue and no cost. The second problem we see is selling an item for an old cost. As I said a moment ago, all ERP systems that run on a perpetual basis, they will have the benefit of history. So if you've sold an item previously and purchased it in, you will have the last or the average price at that period of time. But what happens if the value of that item's gone up 30, 40, 100% since you last bought it? You're going to have a gap between what is showing on your cost, on your profit and loss, versus what the true cost actually is. How that looks is the following. We sell an item for $100 and 12 months ago we bought it for $35, but now it costs us $50 and we haven't entered the $50 invoice in. The system will use the old cost associated with the product or item and thinks we've sold it for $100 and it's cost us $35. In reality though, the item we've sold for $100 actually cost us $50, but our profit and loss will show the old value. This leads the focus to being on entering your purchase invoices as quickly as possible from when the goods arrive and the invoices arrive. The third mistake we see is not factoring in landed costs. What is landed cost? Well, if I'm getting something from a local supplier, there isn't really a landed cost. I'm getting it locally. So it's a fully costed item that I'm ordering in. Whereas a lot of manufacturing and wholesale businesses will import their products in. The element here is the product itself will be significantly cheaper, or it should be significantly cheaper, but you've got to pay for it to come from wherever it's being manufactured in to your warehouse or to your location. For example, you could buy an item from a local supplier for $100, or you could order it from an overseas supplier for $40, but you've also got to acknowledge $25 worth of freight that goes onto it, and therefore we cost that item at $65. The reason we cost this at $65 and not the $40 is we want to have a like-for-like comparison between the local supplier and the overseas supplier. So our true cost of that item is actually $65, not the $40 that it says on the price list. The next biggest mistake, and this one here is an absolute doozy when you see it, is inconsistency of stock codes. Your system might have the exact same item listed under multiple stock codes. You may have the exact same item where you have your own internal code, you have 2 suppliers codes, 3 suppliers codes. They are all listed in the system. So if you run an inventory list, you might see some allocated to your internal stock code, you might see some allocated to a supplier's stock code. It's all over the place. One real life example I saw with a client was they had 4 stock codes for a particular item. They had the old internal code, they had the new internal code because they did a change about 3 or 4 years ago, and they had 2 supplier codes for the exact same item. So all up, it was listed 4 times. What are the chances of having it accurate if you have it listed 4 different times? The goal here is very simple. Have one universal stock code for your products. And it can't be the old one, it can't be the new one, it has to be one specific item. The question you might be asking is, what if I get that stock item from multiple suppliers? The vast majority of ERP systems will have a supplier stock code functionality. So if your stock code is ABC123 and you get that from 3 different suppliers, you can link your stock code to the supplier code. When you're raising a purchase order, you're able to use the supplier code, but it links directly to your code in your system. All of a sudden, the problem you have of 4 different stock codes, you still have all the relevant information, but it's all linked to a single stock code. The next one is what we're going to refer to as miscellaneous stock codes. The only thing worse than inconsistencies with stock codes and having completely different stock codes for the exact same item is being lazy and just using miscellaneous stock codes. At least with using the wrong code or having multiple codes, people are often not doing it with ill intentions or out of laziness. They're just going, oh, I get that from that supplier, I'm going to buy it, and it comes through the system. Miscellaneous codes is just going, I'm just going to use this generic code, I'm going to put a description in here because I can't be bothered finding it. And again, you end up with a mess. If we count it and we want to quantify it, it has to have a stock code. So miscellaneous stock codes can be used, but they are the absolute exception rather than the rule. The exception being if it's a consumable, if it's oils or rags or tape or whatever it is you use around your warehouse or your manufacturing process where you don't track it and you don't cost it, you can use those as a miscellaneous code potentially. But again, if you're buying oils or nuts and bolts and rivets and all sorts of small things like that, you'd probably still want to have a stock code that you use that to buy with. You might not necessarily track it down to the absolute nth degree of the last item. So that problem there, miscellaneous stock codes, is one of the worst. The 6th problem we see is quantities are inaccurate. I say potato, you say potato, you say meters, you say tons, you say square meters, you say lengths, you say liters, you say units. You have all these different metrics, but there's an inconsistency there. This can lead to massive blowouts in what your stock is showing in a perpetually based system. We need to define what the definitive unit being used is for each stock item. Now, the vast majority of stock items are probably going to be just units, 1 for 1. I buy a packet of 10 and I have 10 of the thing, whatever that thing is. But it also, in a number of times, you might have an option of lengths, of square meters, the length meters. I know some places where they order it in lengths and the lengths are multiple meters long. So if you order it in meters, you're going to get one number. If you order it in lengths, you're going to have a different number. The key item here though is to be definitive in your units of measurement across your entire stock base. When we look at the solutions in a moment, you'll find that this one is not difficult without just a little bit of thought going into whenever we purchase or manufacture an item. But inconsistency of units, you should see some finances we've seen impacted by literally hundreds of millions of dollars when someone has got a quantity wrong. Now the error is relatively easy to fix because it is so ridiculously large, but often it is easily lost because a square meter versus a length might not be easily identifiable to people, as opposed to some ridiculous mistake that's made that has a $32 million impact on the numbers, and then you just reverse that out. The seventh problem we see is an inaccurate bill of materials, or what we refer to as BOMs. A bill of material, or BOM, is the recipe for creating an item that we manufacture. So if I manufacture office furniture and I'm producing a set of drawers, and yes, they're in my eye line down there, so I'm using it as a bit of a cheat, all the different types of wood and the lengths of wood that go into creating those drawers form the bill of materials, plus the handles to pull open the drawers will form part of the bill of materials. Let's look at an example. We have a stock code, which is the finished good. We will call that stock code finish 1. What goes into finish 1 is stock code ABC. We need 2 of those and they cost $100 each. Stock code XYZ, and we need 5 of those and they cost $300 each. And stock code 123, we need 1 of those and they cost $400 each. When finished 1 is manufactured, it should create 1 new stock code of $2,100 worth of cost, being the $200 for ABC, the $1,500 for XYZ, and the $400 for 123. What should happen in your ERP is all the items that you used to create the finished product will reduce down by the amount that's consumed, and you increase the finish 1 stock item by the 1 unit that has just been manufactured. So you reduce down your inputs and you increase your output. Now the problems associated with the bill of materials. The first one, probably comes as no surprise, is the recipe itself is inaccurate. Instead of something taking 2 items, it actually takes 4 items. And instead of this item, that item's actually obsolete. We now use another item. Also, you look at the problems we've just spoken about. The problems we've spoken about previously will also show themselves in inaccurate bill of material processes. For example, if we're selling an item without cost, or we're manufacturing an item without a cost in the bill of materials, it is going to show through at $0 cost, understating the value of our manufacturing. If we're inconsistent with our stock codes, or we are using miscellaneous stock codes, we're going to have an incorrect recipe because it might be referring to a supplier code, it might be referring to an old code, or it might even be referring to, worst of all, a miscellaneous code, which is a dead end right there. This will lead also when we've got the unit of measurement incorrect. If we're looking at the bill of materials and we're using lengths of steel, but in the actual stock item it's referring to meters or tons or something else, the costings of that item and the amount of that item that is going to be taken out of stock is going to be incorrect. This will lead to your costings for the item being wildly inaccurate. The 8th element is not completing bill of materials at all. We've seen several manufacturing businesses who don't even complete bill of materials. This means you have no idea how much your products cost to produce, you have no idea how much stock you have, and you have no idea how much stock you're consuming. What you will see in your financial reports and your stock reports, if you're not doing bill of materials in a manufacturing business, is the following. If we use our example again of the finish 1 stock item, this being the item we're selling, this is the item we're manufacturing. What you will see if you look at the stock item of finish 1 is a negative number, and potentially a massive negative number depending on how many you've sold, because the stock system and the ERP system will reduce the system down by 1 each time you sell the item, but it isn't adding back the 1 for every time you manufacture it. Also, the ingredients that go into the manufacturing, instead of being massively understated, will be wildly overstated. The stock items of ABC, XYZ, and 123 will just have their purchases going through the system, but it won't actually have the stock being consumed in the manufacturing process. Now we've gone through those 8 errors, you might go, gosh, how on earth are you ever going to rectify all those problems, and why would anyone actually use the perpetual stock method? I'm a massive believer, and if I had a choice, I would always want to do perpetual stock methodology because it is the most accurate when it's done right. And if you follow these rules, I promise you, you will have a very, very, very strong understanding of what it costs you to produce your product. And when you know your cost to produce your product, the game is yours to win. The first rule is never sell anything without a cost. Make sure you're investing into your finance team and your finance team are on the ball so that they are entering all the relevant purchase invoices as soon as the information becomes available so that you embed a cost for that stock item into your system. And if we sell that item, we're not at risk of selling it for zero cost or an old cost. I would highly recommend that somebody on your sales team or someone in management does a daily review of all the stock items you've sold and make sure there are no items that are sold with a revenue value and no cost value. That needs to be rectified immediately by your finance team if there is anything that is sold with zero cost, because you'll be overstating your profitability and overstating the stock you have on hand. The next thing is ensure all freight costs associated with imports are attached to the stock item. Pretty much any ERP that has inventory management on it will allow you to put landed costs onto your stock purchases. So like that example we looked at earlier, the $40 unit price plus the $25 per unit of freight and associated costs gets you the $65. The system will do it for you if you have the information there and you're disciplined in your process in putting it through the ERP. I'm a huge believer in this third element, and that is having a stock protector. You either have one person or a very small group of individuals who are allowed to add new stock codes to your system. They are responsible for adding stock codes. They are also responsible for protecting the existing stock codes of the system, and there isn't that element of 2 supplier codes, an old code and a new code being in your system. There is one universal code for your business, and the supplier codes are then attached, or what they might be called as alternate codes also. They are also responsible for ensuring that no miscellaneous stock codes are being used, and if they are being used, it is being done for a purpose and with permission. But with a stock protector in place, I believe you can alleviate any need for miscellaneous codes altogether. The fourth element is your purchasing and sales people and manufacturing people need to think about units of measurement. It doesn't take much effort at all. Any stock item that you can click into within your ERP, on the very first screen, I would say just about of any system, will have the unit of measurement in there. Understand what that unit of measurement is. So if you've got the stock protector who's ensuring we have one stock code for every stock item, they will also ensure that the unit of measurement is relevant. The unit of measurement then for you, if you're in purchasing or manufacturing, needs to reflect in your calculations so there's consistency in our costings and our stock on hand. It only takes a moment. But take that moment to look in there and see what the unit of measurement is for that stock code. And the fifth element, if you're in manufacturing, have a BOM champion, a bill of materials champion. This is not an easy role to fill because it needs to be somebody who knows your product with intricate detail. So it's clearly going to be somebody with a lot of experience in your business and somebody who is respected, because they're going to have to talk to different areas of the business to make sure they're getting the information they need to ensure the recipe is accurate within the system. This might sound a massive investment because we're going to pull someone away from operations, which is obviously having value because of their experience and because of their knowledge. But I've seen in numerous examples that investment that a business makes in that person becoming the BOM champion, the value that they add massively outweighs the cost and input they put into the process, because you understand the costings and the intricacies associated with delivering your product. I implore you, if you're a manufacturing business, have a bill of materials champion, ensuring that they're accurate in relation to the stock codes used and the quantities, and the recipes themselves are accurate. In summary, you'll notice that with the benefits of Perpetual in relation to really in-depth understanding of what your costings are, come great responsibility. There's a lot more obligations here than if you're running a periodic stock basis. But the reality is with running a Perpetual methodology, you're going to have information that far outweighs any periodic manufacturing or wholesale business. These goals and objectives take time, they take effort, and they're going to involve a financial investment of people's wages and time to get these things right. But I promise you that the benefits of your profitability and also your cash flow with stock management will far outweigh the investments you make.